We're here today in Toronto's Annex, talking to director Tom Diamond. We'd like to get some insights from him into his working process with the 4 poems entitled Gallows Humor by David James Brock, and how they've come to be part of this larger show, A Joke Before the Gallows. Tom, such a pleasure to see you today, and thank you for welcoming us to your backyard.
Thank you so much. It's the first time I've been in my yard, seriously, in months, now that the winter is coming to an end.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of a pre-spring chill, but we'll embrace it.
There is indeed.
It's been such a pleasure working with you over the last year and a half, and when we started working together, this was very much an exercise in learning how to act, learning the basics of acting. For myself, and getting to know David Brock's text, his 4 monologues, or what started as poetry. Tell me a little bit about your background as a director, as an opera director, and as a director in general, working with musicians.
Well, let me start with your first question in here. The first thing you proposed here is that, when you first came to me, Adam, we had no idea that we would turn this into a film or into a live stream. And so the idea is that you had commissioned these 4 poems so that you could play these extraordinary scherzi and have some text around them, have something other than just someone who plays the piano.
Right.
A performance artist, in a sense, sort of expanding your craft, expanding the way that you work as a performer. And you and I met at a party.
We did, yes.
And we had a
Mutual
conversation,
friend.
and you said to me, "Oh, I hear that you work with musicians and singers." And I said, yes, I do. So, it was the idea that I said, well, why don't you come and coach with me? So you started to coach with me. And of course, what we realized soon enough was that because you are a pianist, you had never really acted. So the process not only became in terms of looking at David Brock's poetry, which is extraordinary, but also you figuring out how to process this in a situation where, unlike being on film where you only have to get it right one time, stage actors have to have some craft so that they can repeat things. So, the plan was that you would do this all over the place. And so I started to teach you how to act, which was interesting. And, and of course, I've been teaching singers for years and years and years how to act. And recently, or more, in the last few years, I've been working with the Rebex program at the Royal Conservatory, where I've been working with harpists and violinists and percussionists in regards to their performances. So it's not simply a question of teaching them how to act, but teaching them how to kind of input into kind of their creativity in terms of, again, like you expanding past the idea of simply being someone who plays an instrument. And what we're realizing, of course, during this COVID pandemic is that if we just do what we do, it's often not enough anymore. Mm-hmm. So we're all kind of expanding in there. So you and I started to coach kind of regularly, and you were traveling back and forth from New York, so that when you would be in town, you'd come and we would coach together. We'd spend an hour together, and we kind of put our toe in the foot, starting with the first poem, poem, monologue. What are they, Adam? Are they poems or monologues?
I think they're definitely monologues now.
Well,
after we've had our way with them, yeah.
Well, I think that David might have thought of them as poetry because
Yes.
he is a poet, and you and I, on a dramatic level, needed to kind of context them. Mm-hmm. So initially, we just found our way into the specific poems, but once we realized that we were going to kind of put this into a kind of a show that would be streamed, is that we had to come up with a story and an idea, a larger uber idea here. So of course we took the idea of gallows humor and kind of ran with it. And you and I together, in terms of our collaboration, which then went from a studio where we would be coaching together at U of T, we started to get on Zoom together and started to have these regular sessions, working through not only the specific poems, but the larger context of the piece itself. And that's how we sort of came to conceive this.
Right. And would you say that evolution was directly related to the fact that we had to do this on camera now, that this was the central aspect, or do you think that kind of came later in our process?
Well, I think it came once we realized that this was the way it was going.
Right.
And we kind of looked at this as, how do we want to do this, of course, based on what is on the page.
Yeah.
So we looked at both at the poetry and at the music. Because, of course, as an opera director, I can't conceive anything outside of the music. Because,
Yes.
Musik ist eine heilige Kunst. Music is the holiest form, and music comes really as kind of the backbone of anything that I do, even more so than text, although I would never dismiss the fact that the text is hugely important. And we started to conceive it based on those ideas. And we looked at the idea of, firstly, gallows humor. I mean, what is gallows humor? It's, ironic humor in this desperate place. Black comedy. It's deals with worrisome subjects like death, right? And certainly out of David's poetry, that was easy to do because he kind of threw us into these kind of situations, these disparate situations from poem to poem to poem. And somehow you and I needed to come up with an idea that would give the piece a unanimity of purpose so it didn't feel disjointed, with the centerpiece always going back to the music, going back to you playing these amazing works. And you and I also had been spending a lot of time looking at things online and decided that the way for us to go was to kind of try to go live stream.
Yes.
Because the idea for us was very much the idea that if you wanted to see something pre-recorded, we have Netflix, we have Amazon Prime Video, we have YouTube. We have so many places that we can go to see things that are pre-recorded. And so many of our colleagues, in a way to kind of make work during the time of the pandemic, would look for ways of how to put their work forward. And we saw a lot of them do concerts that had been pre-taped.
Yes.
And the performances often wonderful, often extraordinary. But what you and I were both missing was the live element. And I know that you as a performer love to perform.
I do. Yeah.
What's the difference for you with recording something and performing something live?
Yeah. It's a great question, and one that a lot of us are in the arts community are really starting to grapple with on a very real level because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I always grew up being a performer and getting used to the skill set of being on stage, and getting used to that experience. Going into a recording studio was something that happened much later in life, in a very real way. I didn't record my first album until my 20s, so that was a whole kind of different set of skills that were required to go into a studio and make really great recorded art. The thrill of being on stage is like nothing else, and I've gotten better and better at it as I've kind of grown as an artist. I'd even proclaim that I invent in a spontaneous way on stage, and new ideas sometimes come in the moment, and that is purely the result of that energetic connection with the audience that you can't get anywhere else. And we're all missing that, especially those of us who love to perform. I mean, that's what is so important about offering a live stream, getting as close as one can to the thrill and the buzz of a live performance.
Well, when we talked about that, and you made that so clear to me, and I've made one film in my career, right? A little Bravo short, a puppet opera that I put online every Valentine's Day called The Perfect Match, about two sock puppets who fall in love together. That was my only real experience as a director of film. So this became kind of a new adventure for me as well in terms of going on to cam. And once I knew how much you love to perform and we loved live, the first thing that came to mind here was the idea of live TV, the days of live TV. When people would go into a studio and it would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're live. And really being on the precipice as a performer and certainly for me as a director in that way, of kind of knowing exactly where you want to go, rehearsing it to the point where you could get on cam and feel that even though it was a live stream, that you could do this without kind of going into a big panic of, oh my God, it's live, because you have so much to focus on. And through our work together, as you studying craft, knowing how to repeat things, is that we were able to kind of create this mise en scène here that was something that not only could be done in our live stream, but for you to take after and kind of go into a live situation and go from there.
Yes.
Also, I think that, there's something about live that connects to our understanding of what gallows humor is here. Being in that awkward place in that moment where things happen that are kind of out of your control. I mean, we keep talking about in the live stream of the idea of Murphy's Law. On the night, anything is possible.
Yes.
Like on the stage in a live performance, anything is possible. And Murphy's Law tells us that anything that can go wrong probably will. So we're just rolling with the punches here.
I'm jealous. You dodged obvious. But not that piano. The playwright died destitute, thinking of his one big hit. The pharaoh cried for pyramids she'd leave behind, picturing an underworld of low ceilings. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of gallows humor through the pen of David James Brock.
Well, David has a creative mind, we know. And when we looked at these poems to begin with, of course, we looked at them individually. We started with one, and we went to 2, 3, 4. We read through the whole thing. We played through all the music and tried to kind of connect the music to the poetry. Then to Adam Sherkin, or as we call him in this piece, the character of Adam Sherkin, because it's not really you, but it's based on you in some way. Yeah. And, as you and I kind of collaborated on this, we kind of came up with this story based on David's writing. That first piece being a kind of a eulogy. I mean, it says so in the piece. We thought, how do we get from the Tapestry Studio to a eulogy,
right,
to a scherzo? And this is how we kind of wrestled this into some kind of idea. Also, the conversation became, when you're doing a live stream, what are the worst things that could happen to you? So, of course, we had to put one of those in right from the top, which kind of was the springboard into that first piece, which then we get through. The second piece, we thought, who are you talking to here? What's going on here? And we kind of created this idea of this kind of entity that kind of moves into your world that has to be dealt with immediately. So things that keep taking you away from the moment at hand. Then we got to the third piece, which talks about literally gallows humor. And we thought, well, let's go literal. So we have gone extremely literal on that, which also has big implications into the whole world of what it means to be a performer. It's like, who hasn't performed something where they feel, in essence, their neck is on the line just before they perform something, right? So that came into that. And then when we got to the fourth poem, we thought, what are we going to do now that isn't a repetition of what we've already seen and heard? And you and I had this conversation, knowing that you're a composer as well, is that I said, well, what if you compose something and we merge the poetry and your music at the same time? And again, being a keener that you are, you kind of grabbed this and just ran with it. And that's kind of how we put this whole evening together in a story that is really a kind of a story of Adam, the character of Adam Sherkin, performing a live stream concert on the night. And again, which you could do in a concert hall. It's just a simple adaptation of that, ultimately. But in a sense, we've made a play.
Yes. Yes, we have. I mean, and thank you for that sort of creative um, insight that you brought and really led us there.
Well, what's so great, Adam, is that I've been so fortunate in my career to have so much experience, not just directing, the Turner classics, but also moving into the world of home box office,
Yeah.
right? Of doing stuff that's much more contemporary. And, my 10 years at Tapestry as a dramaturg, how many great writers like David Brock and so many other great writers did I get to work with in terms of developing works for the operatic stage, and then my training just as a theater director,
Hmm.
where I work a lot with script interpretation. And I took all that early work of mine into my operatic works. And I think that that's in some ways that separates me from other opera directors, because I actually do script analysis,
Hmm.
and it's interesting because when I think about my career, and I think about if I were starting out again now, I'd probably have a very different career.
Hmm.
Because in the 21st century, what separates opera directors who are working from other opera directors is their ability to conceive on a high level. So you come in with some interesting conceit for a classic piece that hopefully is hand in glove, hopefully isn't some highfalutin idea that has nothing to do with the work just because I had some notion in there. But I've always approached my work with craft, with the craft of an admiration for great writing
Hmm.
and great composition, and how that kind of what that means to us sitting in the theater at that moment. Whether it be a classic production in traditional clothing, or a contemporary production, or a brand new piece, but the idea that you and I could create a work here that actually had a beginning, middle, and end, a theme, an idea, a thrust, and would not only satisfy our audience, but satisfy you and me in the creation of the work.
Well, Tom, it's been an absolute thrill to work together, and I can't thank you enough for your devotion to this project and humoring me and learning how to act. And it's been a great ride.
Oh, Adam, the pleasure has been mine.
I'm really excited about quietly excited about the final product as it premieres this spring, and its lifespan thereafter on stage and elsewhere. What's up next for you in your directing work?
We've been working on this for so long now because we had to delay because of the pandemic and stuff like that. I somehow I think that our project is like my Groundhog Day. Well, I'll be working on this with you forever, and I hope that I get to work on this with you forever. That when you take it to the stage, that we can reconceive it,
Yeah.
just to go in that. Next up for me, amazingly, is this extraordinary new work about the last 3 days in the life of Martin Luther King,
Hmm.
called I
Wow.
Dream. And it's a project that came my way about a year and a half ago, approaching 2 years ago. And it was a project that has been kind of dancing around the world for a while, to not a lot of acclaim. And again, because of my work as a dramaturg and to do a lot of new works, a producer approached me who knew my operatic work, who I had worked with a number of times, and asked if I would get involved in this project. My first feeling was is that they needed a black director on this project, so I backed off. But he encouraged me to speak to the creative artist, this extraordinary man named Douglas Tappan, who's self-taught as a composer and a librettist. And for me, when you hear about a person who is both composer and libretto writer, you kind of get nervous because you know that one of them isn't going to be as good as the other.
Mm.
But in this particular case, this piece is extraordinary, and this man is extraordinary. And it's written in the style of the period, so it's kind of R&B,
Hmm.
jazz influence. It's a bit
Wow.
musical theatery, pretty much through composed, and it's about Martin Luther King believing that he would not last because of all the things that had happened to him, and and we I spoke to the creative artist and who lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and he talked to a lot of people about this project, and he wanted me. So I was happy to get involved in this and thrilled to be a part of a project that I think has real legs, and certainly through this last period in our world has real importance.
Hmm.
I want to work on pieces that have the ability to change the world and the way we see the world. And I'm honored to be able to work on a piece about the great Martin Luther King.
Tom, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for inviting us to your backyard, and we look forward to the future.
Adam, it's so nice to see you in person because all our rehearsals after this all started have been on Zoom. So, and do you know that you're shorter in person than you are in real life?
I've been told that before.
Gallows humor.